Shortly after the release of an audio recording this past Saturday morning of a conversation that allegedly...
Let's take a second to think of some logical reasons why relatively unknown WNBA players might receive criticism from portions of the public. Let's also consider why the league spent nearly 3 decades struggling to achieve widespread popularity and consistent commercial success despite years of effort to grow the game. According to a leaked list, some reports claim that WNBA referees may have received direct payments allegedly connected to League Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. That's the allegation at the center of the growing controversy. Supporters of the theory argue it goes beyond simple internet rumors, pointing to claims of an internal investigation, confidential documents, and even an alleged audio recording. Naturally, those reports have fueled speculation about whether Caitlin Clark has been treated unfairly throughout the season and whether certain games have been influenced behind the scenes. If allegations of this magnitude were ever proven true, they would represent one of the biggest scandals in WNBA history and could shake the league to its core. That's why so many people are paying close attention, believing this could become a defining moment that forces the league to answer difficult questions. Here's where the story takes another dramatic turn. What some commentators are calling the biggest controversy the WNBA has ever faced reportedly came into the spotlight after claims involving NBA Commissioner Adam Silver began circulating. According to those reports, this wasn't presented as just another social media rumor. The claims described an official audit, a formal review, and a list alleging that certain referees received improper payments connected to WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. The accusations suggest those payments were disguised as consulting fees, bonuses, or other forms of compensation, raising serious questions among critics about the integrity of the league. If any of those allegations were ever substantiated, the implications would be enormous, making this one of the most closely watched stories surrounding the WNBA. The league's top executive, Cathy Engelbert, has become the central figure in these allegations. According to the claims being circulated, the objective was to protect certain players while limiting the visibility and opportunities of others. Supporters of that theory argue it could explain several controversial officiating decisions throughout the season, particularly those involving Caitlin Clark. But the bigger question remains: why would the league allegedly hold back the very player many believe has brought unprecedented attention and financial growth to the sport? Who would benefit if her influence were reduced? And if officials were ever found to have intentionally ignored obvious fouls or acted with bias, it would raise serious concerns about the integrity of the competition itself. Many fans believe those are the questions that deserve clear answers. Looking at Clark's season, supporters argue she has repeatedly absorbed hard contact without receiving the same whistle as other players. They've pointed to moments where she was knocked to the floor, hit across the arms, or bumped on drives with little or no foul call. Then, when she showed visible frustration, technical fouls often seemed to follow quickly. To many critics, those sequences created the impression that Clark wasn't being officiated consistently. Whether that's the result of inconsistent refereeing or simply the fast-paced nature of the game remains a matter of debate. But it's one of the biggest reasons discussions about officiating have remained at the center of the WNBA conversation throughout the season nevertheless. What if a star player repeatedly found herself at the free throw line after questionable whistles? Is it simply coincidence, or could there ever be something more? These are the kinds of questions that naturally emerge whenever officiating becomes the center of controversy. That's exactly what many fans have started debating. When they believe the same players consistently receive favorable whistles, while others appear to absorb heavy contact without calls, confidence in the integrity of the officiating begins to erode. Some critics have even speculated about whether officials could have undisclosed conflicts of interest or whether outside influences might affect games. There is no public evidence supporting those claims, but the mere fact that fans are asking them illustrates how damaging repeated officiating controversies can become. Once supporters begin wondering whether games are being decided by whistles instead of basketball, trust in the competition starts to weaken. Many fans believe they've watched Caitlin Clark absorb excessive physical play without consistent protection, while stars such as Aya Wilson seem to receive a much friendlier whistle. At the same time, they've seen coaches openly challenge officiating decisions, only to be penalized themselves. Whether those perceptions are accurate or not, frustration continues to grow, and more fans are choosing to voice those concerns publicly instead of remaining silent. Social media has only intensified the conversation. Hashtags criticizing officiating, posts demanding fairness for Caitlin Clark, memes mocking referees, and satirical videos questioning controversial calls have spread rapidly across multiple platforms. The debate has expanded far beyond fans alone, with several current and former NBA players also weighing in on officiating and calling for greater consistency. When supporters lose confidence in the officials, the league's credibility inevitably suffers. If players, coaches, and fans all begin questioning the integrity of the whistle, the league faces a much bigger challenge than any single controversial game. To be clear, Cathy Engelbert has not resigned as WNBA commissioner. However, criticism directed toward the league's leadership has continued to intensify, with some fans demanding accountability over repeated officiating controversies. The conversation has moved well beyond missed calls and now includes broader questions about transparency, leadership, and confidence in the league's decision-making. Allegations have circulated online claiming that leaked documents reference consulting payments involving certain referees and Cathy Engelbert, while some have pointed to reported reviews involving league operations. As of now, those claims have not been substantiated with credible public evidence. Nevertheless, critics continue asking whether league leadership has done enough to address concerns surrounding officiating, communication, and transparency. They argue that prolonged silence only fuels additional speculation and uncertainty. Whether those accusations ultimately prove true or false, many fans believe the league would benefit from directly addressing the controversy instead of allowing unanswered questions to domino. Let's ask the toughest question of all. What if every allegation being discussed turned out to be true? What if the games really were manipulated? What if Caitlin Clark's rise was intentionally held back? What if MVP races were influenced behind the scenes? What if referees somehow benefited financially from the calls they made? If any of that were ever proven, it would cast doubt on every box score, every statistic, every win, and every loss. It would mean fans were misled, players were denied a fair competition, and the integrity of the sport itself had been compromised. At that point, the conversation would no longer be about a handful of questionable whistles. It would become a debate about trust and whether people could still believe in the game they love. So here's the bigger question. What should happen next? Should the NBA become more involved in overseeing the WNBA? Should controversial games receive additional review? Should the league introduce stronger oversight and greater transparency? Because if legitimate concerns aren't addressed quickly, critics argue the long-term damage to the league's reputation could be severe. And the concerns don't stop with fans. Reports have circulated claiming that some of the WNBA's corporate partners are closely monitoring the situation and evaluating future business relationships. If major sponsors ever decided to pull back their support, the consequences could be enormous. Fewer nationally televised games, reduced team resources, slower salary growth, and the loss of momentum the league has worked so hard to build. Money ultimately follows confidence, and whenever trust begins to disappear, business partners inevitably start asking difficult questions. At the same time, this discussion extends far beyond Caitlin Clark or Aya Wilson. It's about the long-term credibility and future of the entire WNBA. Some commentators have argued that increased scrutiny from the NBA could ultimately strengthen the league by improving transparency and restoring public confidence. Others believe the current controversy simply highlights the need for clearer communication and stronger accountability. Whatever the outcome, fans are watching more closely than ever, and many believe this moment could become a turning point for the league. Do you think the WNBA has handled these controversies appropriately, or does the league need major changes to rebuild trust? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy in-depth basketball coverage, be sure to subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned because this story is still developing. The public conversation. Whether that's the result of inconsistent refereeing or simply the fast-paced nature of the game remains a matter of debate, but it's one of the biggest reasons discussions about officiating have remained at the center of the WNBA conversation throughout the season nevertheless. Caitlin Clark remains the player drawing sold-out crowds everywhere she goes. She's introduced countless new fans to the Indiana Fever, and her popularity has helped bring unprecedented national television exposure to the league. That's why many people continue asking the same question. If she's driving so much attention, why do some fans believe she's being treated differently? With these allegations now circulating and reports of an investigation generating headlines, supporters have started revisiting controversial moments throughout the season. They point to missed foul calls, what they view as inconsistent officiating standards, and situations where Clark appeared to absorb significant contact without a whistle, while similar plays involving other players resulted in immediate fouls. To those critics, it no longer feels like isolated incidents, but rather a recurring pattern. That leads to the question many fans keep asking. Was Caitlin Clark being treated differently from the start? Now, let's turn to Alyssa Thomas. There's no denying she's one of the WNBA's premier veterans, and among the league's most complete all-around players. Her talent isn't in question. However, the officiating during the recent Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury matchup became a major talking point among fans. Many supporters felt that whenever Indiana started building momentum, a whistle would interrupt the action, often sending Alyssa Thomas or Phoenix to the free throw line. At the same time, Fever players appeared to battle through heavy contact before receiving similar calls. Whether those perceptions reflect inconsistent officiating or simply difficult judgment calls remains open to debate, but they added even more fuel to the growing discussion surrounding refereeing in the WNBA. Aaliyah Boston battled through plenty of physical contact in the paint all night, yet many fans felt she wasn't rewarded with the same whistle on similar plays. That led Fever supporters to question whether both teams were truly being officiated under the same standard. When nearly identical situations produce completely different rulings, it's understandable why fans begin raising concerns about the consistency of the officiating. As the game continued, Indiana head coach Stephanie White finally reached her breaking point during the Fever's matchup with the Phoenix Mercury. Following another controversial sequence involving Caitlin Clark, White passionately confronted the officials and was assessed a technical foul. From her perspective, a crucial play featured obvious contact that went uncalled, and her emotional response reflected weeks of growing frustration over what she believed had been inconsistent officiating throughout the contest. Ultimately, the discussion extends far beyond a single player or one disputed whistle. The larger issue is consistency and accountability. Fans simply want every player, whether it's Alyssa Thomas, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, or anyone else, to be judged by the same standard every night. When controversial calls repeatedly become the biggest storyline after games, people naturally begin questioning whether officiating crews are being held accountable, and whether the league needs a more consistent approach. For many supporters, Stephanie White's technical foul represented more than an emotional outburst. It symbolized a coach publicly challenging what critics believe has become an increasingly frustrating pattern of officiating decisions that lets talk about money. Because whenever controversy surrounds professional sports, financial incentives inevitably become part of the conversation. Think about the fastest growing segment of the sports industry today, sports betting. Point totals, player props, fouls, assists, and countless other wagers now generate billions of dollars every year.